Thanksgiving should have been about family and gratitude. Instead, my wife turned it into the night she mocked me in front of everyone. She thought she'd humiliate me and walk away unscathed. She never imagined I'd been quietly collecting every lie. By the time dessert was served, her downfall was already in motion. Thanksgiving in Ashburn, Virginia was the kind of event that always felt more like an obligation than a celebration. My sister-in-law hosted, and every year she acted as if she was doing the rest of us a favor by orchestrating a dinner none of us really wanted to be at. Still, I showed up. I carved the turkey. I played the part of a dutiful husband. 10 of us were packed around the long table, passing plates and trying to outdo each other's polite conversation. My wife, Jenna, sat at the opposite end, leaning back like she was holding court. She'd spent hours preparing herself to look unbothered, and in a way, it worked. She looked like she was exactly where she wanted to be. I was not. I'd stopped feeling at ease around her months earlier, the night I woke up and saw her phone lit up on the nightstand. One message preview was enough to change everything. Still thinking about that kiss? Can't sleep. She'd rolled over, mumbled something about a late text from her friend Emily, and tucked the phone under her pillow. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something slide out of place that never quite returned. From that point on, I started paying attention. I noticed the way she started taking her gym bag to work 3 days a week, though she'd never been the kind of person to exercise before. How she kept her phone on silent, screen always facing down. How she started coming home late, offering vague excuses she didn't bother to make believable. I was never the suspicious type. If you'd asked anyone who knew me, they would have said I trusted Jenna completely. That I was too easygoing for my own good. That I didn't have it in me to confront anyone. They were right about the first part. But not the second. That night at the Thanksgiving table, she waited until everyone was comfortable, half a glass of wine in, before she decided to humiliate me. My brother-in-law Brian was joking about how marriage killed romance. It was the kind of stupid remark people make to fill time between bites of stuffing. Nobody really thought much of it. But Jenna saw an opportunity. She lifted her glass without even glancing at me and said, her voice loud enough to carry to the far end of the table. Some of us are still waiting for there to be a libido. Nothing to be thankful for in bed, that's for sure. The laughter that followed was instant and raw. A couple of her cousins actually clapped their hands over their mouths to stifle it. Her sister nearly choked on her drink. And Jenna? She kept her eyes locked on her glass as if she hadn't just set fire to whatever was left of our marriage in front of an audience. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I forced a small smile, the kind you make when you know everyone is watching, waiting to see if you'll crumble. I didn't crumble. While the conversation stumbled forward, I kept one hand resting on my phone beneath the table where I'd been checking whether the last file transfer completed. Because what Jenna didn't know was that I'd spent the past 2 weeks syncing her entire message history to an old iPad she'd forgotten we even owned. She thought she was in control, that I was too passive to ever do anything but sulk and pretend nothing was wrong. She thought wrong. After dinner, while everyone drifted into the living room to pick at pie and watch football, she came over to me, still smiling like she'd just won something. She put her hand on my shoulder and leaned down. "You okay?" she asked, voice syrupy, almost concerned. "You look tense." I looked up at her and felt the strangest calm. "No worries," I said, brushing an imaginary crumb from her sweater. "I'm just saving my appetite for later." She seemed satisfied with that. She didn't catch the edge in my voice. She never did. What she also didn't realize was that her little performance had cemented what I already knew. There wasn't any fixing this. There wasn't any coming back. Later that night, she passed out in our bed, still fully dressed, her phone in one hand. I lay next to her, wide awake, the folder I'd started building in my mind finally complete. It wasn't anger that kept me awake. It was the clarity that comes when you stop making excuses for someone. That night, I stopped telling myself that she drifted away because of me. Because I hadn't been interesting enough or successful enough or whatever story she'd hinted at in all those small dismissive comments. It was simpler than that. She liked the thrill of secrecy. She liked the feeling of being wanted by someone who wasn't me. And she liked knowing I was too predictable to ever do anything about it. As she slept, I decided she was going to learn that wasn't true. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to beg. I didn't even want revenge in the way most people think about it. I wanted her to see exactly what she'd done without any way to pretend it was anything but deliberate. The night she mocked me at Thanksgiving was the last night she'd get to feel untouchable. She'd spent months preparing her performance. I'd spent months preparing the ending. And in the end, the only surprise was how easy it was to let her think she'd won, all the way up to the moment she realized the script had never belonged to her at all. After Thanksgiving, Jenna acted like nothing had happened. She woke up the next morning humming to herself, making coffee, scrolling through her phone as if she hadn't detonated a grenade in front of our family the night before. She didn't apologize or explain. She didn't need to. She believed she was untouchable. I didn't bring it up. I knew if I confronted her too soon, she'd twist it into another performance, make me look insecure, or claim I was imagining things. So I kept my expression neutral and my voice steady. That was the last time she'd ever get to think she knew what I was capable of. Over the next few days, I moved quickly. I already had access to her messages, hundreds of them. Most were small exchanges, carefully worded so she could claim innocence if I ever questioned her. But it was all there if you knew how to look between the lines. You made me feel like myself again. Wish I was waking up with you instead. Next time we'll stay longer. Greg. That was his name. I'd met him twice at neighborhood get-togethers. He was the kind of man who called himself a consultant but never seemed to actually work. Divorced, according to the gossip Jenna pretended she didn't listen to. He liked to play the wounded good guy, just misunderstood enough to sound interesting to someone bored with her own life. While she was at work, I sat in my home office with the iPad she'd forgotten existed and cataloged everything. I created timelines, screenshotted Uber receipts, matched restaurant reservations against her excuses. It wasn't difficult. She'd gotten lazy, certain I'd never look. And she was right until the moment I decided to stop trusting someone who had no respect left to give. The next step was the finances. She never paid much attention to the details. She liked the idea of being in charge but didn't bother understanding how our accounts were structured. Over 2 evenings, I moved our discretionary funds into an account with only my name on it. I rerouted the mail to a private P.O. box. I locked down anything she could use to drain resources if she sensed what was coming. Then I called Marcus. He'd been my friend since college, working in cybersecurity now. He was discreet and didn't ask questions when I told him I needed help verifying some records. Within 48 hours, he sent me a folder of documents so thorough it made my own research look sloppy. There were phone logs showing late-night calls to Greg that lasted over an hour. Hotel confirmations under her maiden name. Credit card charges for sushi and wine tastings I'd never attended. Even a shared Spotify playlist called ours. I stared at that file longer than I'd expected. Not because it hurt by then, I was too far past anger, but because of how ordinary it all was. She thought she was living some secret, complicated romance. In reality, it was just a series of dull betrayals repeated over and over. A week before Christmas, Jenna made a show of trying to be affectionate. She brought home takeout from a place I liked, sat close to me on the couch, asked about my day. I answered politely. I pretended to be tired, distracted. She seemed relieved. She believed the Thanksgiving incident had passed without consequence. She didn't realize I was simply waiting for the right moment. I wanted her to feel secure. I wanted her to believe she'd managed to humiliate me into submission. That way, when the truth came out, there would be no escaping it. No plausible deniability. No pity. A few days later, I got a call from Emily, Jenna's friend, the one who always seemed eager for gossip. She sounded hesitant, almost nervous. Hey, she said. I don't know if you care about this, but Greg's going to be at the wine tasting Jenna's planning for January. She invited him herself. Just thought you should know. I thanked her. Hung up. And for the first time in months, I smiled for real. Emily wasn't warning me out of kindness. She wanted to see what would happen when everything blew up. It didn't bother me. It only confirmed what I'd suspected, that the people Jenna surrounded herself with weren't her friends. They were spectators. The week before Jenna's birthday, I booked a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a place she'd once said she dreamed of visiting. Back then, I told her it was too expensive. Now it was exactly what I needed, remote, beautiful, and just far enough from everything that she wouldn't see what was coming. I sent her an email invite, worded like a reconciliation. I want to start over. Just us. No distractions. She responded with an over-the-top string of hearts and exclamation points. This is perfect. I can't wait. That same night, I forwarded the address and dates to Lauren, Greg's ex-wife. She and I had only exchanged a handful of messages. I didn't have to explain much. I sent her a single photo of Greg's arm around Jenna's waist, taken from a reflection in a restaurant window. She called me 5 minutes later. I'll drive, she said. That was all. By then, everything was in place. The evidence, the timing, the financial security. I was done collecting proof. All that remained was the final confrontation. The night before we left for the cabin, Jenna was almost giddy. She packed 2 suitcases, ordered new wine glasses, made a playlist of songs she thought were romantic. I let her do it all without comment. When she fell asleep, I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her. It wasn't regret I felt, or sorrow. It was relief. Because the story she'd been writing without my knowledge was almost over. And for the first time in a long time, I was the one holding the ending. We left for the cabin early Friday afternoon. Jenna insisted on driving part of the way, saying she liked having something to focus on. I let her. She spent most of the ride humming along to her playlist, making small talk about how excited she was to reconnect. If she noticed I wasn't matching her energy, she didn't say anything. She kept her phone tucked in her bag. Once, when she thought I wasn't looking, she pulled it out to check for notifications. She didn't realize I'd already seen everything she was hoping to hide. We arrived just after sunset. The cabin sat on a ridge overlooking miles of quiet forest. Jenna stepped out of the car and drew a deep breath like she was preparing herself for some transformative experience. I watched her pretending nothing was wrong and felt a strange, final detachment. She had no idea this was the last act of her performance. Inside, she moved quickly to make the place feel romantic, lighting candles, uncorking a bottle of wine, putting on her carefully selected music. She looked at me as if waiting for approval. I offered a neutral smile. She mistook it for warmth. While she set out glasses, I stepped into the bedroom and pulled the black folder from my bag. I checked that every page was in order, screenshots of messages, phone records, receipts, photos. Nothing dramatic or explicit, just enough to remove any space for denial. At 7:30, Jenna was standing by the kitchen counter, pouring the second glass of wine. She looked almost proud of herself. She thought she'd repaired everything with this trip. She thought she'd convinced me to forget. I walked over and set the folder down between us. She froze, eyes flicking from the folder to my face. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tightening. I didn't sit down. "You should open it." She hesitated, then flipped the cover. I watched her eyes move across the first page, screenshots of texts she'd sent to Greg over the last 6 months. Her hand twitched. She turned another page and found the receipts from the hotels she told me were work conferences. The Uber logs, the Spotify playlist titled ours. She closed the folder slowly. "You've been spying on me." "No," I said. "I've been paying attention." She pressed her palm flat on the counter as if bracing for something. "I can explain." I shook my head. "You've already explained. You just thought I wasn't listening." Jenna opened her mouth, but no words came out. I could see the moment she understood this wasn't something she could talk her way out of. I took a steady breath. "You have about 5 minutes before we're not alone." Her eyes widened. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I walked to the front door, unlocked it, and waited. It wasn't long before headlights cut across the driveway. A car door shut. Footsteps moved up the porch. Jenna stepped back as Lauren entered without knocking. Lauren didn't look at me. She looked straight at Jenna. For a moment, nobody spoke. Jenna shifted her weight, trying to stand taller. Lauren held a folder of her own. "I think you know why I'm here," Lauren said. Jenna swallowed. "This is ridiculous. You both." Lauren cut her off. "No. You don't get to talk over me now." Lauren set her folder next to mine. She'd collected her own evidence, emails Jenna sent to Greg, notes on dates that overlapped with nights Greg had told her he was busy. She flipped it open without ceremony. "You lied to me," Lauren said, voice steady. "You lied to him. You've lied to everyone you know. And I'm here because I won't let you pretend this didn't happen." Jenna's gaze darted to me as if hoping I'd intervene. I didn't move. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about her facing someone she thought would stay silent. Lauren didn't yell. She didn't insult Jenna. She listed facts. Dates. Times. Messages. Every quiet betrayal Jenna had tried to keep separate. When Lauren finished, she closed the folder and met Jenna's stare. "You don't get to act like this was inevitable. You chose it." Jenna's lips parted, but no apology came. I spoke then. "You spent months humiliating me. Laughing behind my back. That's fine, you're free to live however you want. But you don't get to act like it was an accident." She looked at me, eyes wet but dry-voiced. "I never wanted to hurt you." I nodded once. "But you did." Lauren took a step closer. "And you hurt me too. Maybe not in the same way, but you made me feel like I was the problem. Like I was the reason he left." Jenna tried to speak, but Lauren shook her head. "I don't need your apology. I'm here so you'll remember you're not a victim. You're not special. You're just selfish." No one raised their voice. There was no screaming. Just quiet clarity. The kind you can't outrun. Jenna slumped back against the counter. "What happens now?" I picked up the folder. "What happens now is simple. You signed the divorce agreement that was emailed to you an hour ago. You read every page carefully because there's nothing left to negotiate. Her breathing hitched. You already filed? 2 weeks ago, I said. I waited until tonight because I wanted you to understand why. Outside, the wind picked up against the windows. Lauren turned to leave. She paused in the doorway and glanced back at Jenna. I hope you get whatever it is you think you're looking for, she said. Then she walked out without another word. Jenna didn't follow her. She didn't try to stop me when I gathered my things. She just stood there, shoulders trembling, as if she'd finally realized she wasn't in charge of the ending. I didn't look back when I closed the door behind me. Some moments don't deserve a curtain call. I drove away from the cabin without looking back. The road twisted down the ridge in long, silent stretches. My phone buzzed 3 times before I reached the main highway. Calls from Jenna I let go unanswered. By the time I pulled into a small roadside motel, I felt lighter than I had in months. I checked in under my own name. I didn't need to hide where I was or pretend I had something to feel guilty about. In my room, I set my phone on the nightstand and powered it off. Then I laid down and stared at the ceiling, feeling the relief settle in. The last year of suspicion and doubt was over. No more trying to decipher her silences. No more second-guessing my own instincts. The next morning, I woke up to 8 missed calls and a string of texts. We need to talk. This isn't fair. You blindsided me. Can you at least respond? I didn't. Instead, I called my attorney to confirm the divorce papers had been delivered. They had. Jenna had opened the email at 11:07 the night before, minutes after I walked out. According to the process server, she signed the initial acknowledgement form before dawn. The official filing would be processed by Monday. I drove home slowly, stopping for coffee and taking the long route through town. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the house looked exactly the same. For a moment, I wondered if she'd already left. But inside, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in both hands, staring down at it like she expected it to give her instructions. She looked up as I walked in. Her expression was drained of certainty. Can we please talk? She asked. I set my keys on the counter. Talk about what? I don't want this to end like this. I didn't sit down. It already has. Jenna closed her eyes and exhaled. You blindsided me. You acted like everything was normal. No, I said. You decided everything was normal because that was easier. I stopped believing that a long time ago. Her voice dropped. I made mistakes, but you didn't have to humiliate me. I watched her for a long moment. You mean like you humiliated me at Thanksgiving? Or every time you lied about where you were going? She swallowed but didn't answer. I walked to my office and retrieved a slim envelope from the desk drawer. When I returned, I placed it in front of her. That's the updated financial statement. The house is going on the market next week. You'll receive your share when it sells. The separate account is already in your name. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. I don't have anywhere to go. You have options, I said. More than you gave me. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was being factual. She'd spent nearly a year treating our marriage like something disposable. Now she was facing the reality she'd created. I didn't think it would end this way, she whispered. That's because you thought I wouldn't do anything, I said. You were wrong. I walked out of the kitchen, letting the silence close behind me. Upstairs, I packed a small suitcase. I didn't plan to stay in that house again. It felt like a place she'd hollowed out until it was only useful for hiding the truth. Before I left, I sent a single message to Lauren. Thank you for showing up. I hope you get the closure you needed. She responded a few minutes later. I did. Be well. I didn't hear from Jenna again that day. But over the next week, she tried every angle. Calls, emails, messages through mutual friends. Most were polite at first, then gradually edged into desperation. We can still work this out. I didn't mean to hurt you. Don't you remember what we used to have? I didn't answer any of them, because by then, I was finished pretending that what we'd had was still real. A week later, the realtor put the listing sign in the front yard. Jenna sent me one last text. You've made your point. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond, because it wasn't about happiness. It was about honesty. And if she'd ever valued that, we wouldn't have ended up here. A few days after the listing went live, I heard from Emily. She called to tell me Jenna had been removed from their wine club. Apparently, Emily had decided to share a few details about Jenna's affair. It wasn't out of solidarity, it was just the way people like her operated. When the queen falls, everyone else fights over the pieces. Greg didn't last long either. Lauren let me know he'd ghosted Jenna as soon as he realized she no longer had anything left to lose. He blocked her number and told mutual acquaintances she was too unstable. His company quietly forced him to resign over the ethics issues Lauren had exposed. I didn't celebrate any of it. I didn't feel vindicated watching her life unravel. Mostly, I felt relieved I wouldn't have to share space with that kind of dishonesty ever again. 3 weeks later, my attorney confirmed the divorce was finalized. No contest, no appeals, just signatures and paperwork. I moved into a small rental on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, just quiet, clean, mine. The first night there, I lay on a mattress without a frame, in a room without any furniture, and slept better than I had in a year. When I woke up, there were no unread messages, no hidden agendas, no uncertainty, only the freedom I'd been denying myself for too long. A month after I moved out, I ran into Jenna by accident. I was leaving the grocery store with a bag of essentials when I spotted her across the parking lot. She was standing next to her car, loading bags into the trunk. She looked thinner, tired in a way that went beyond a lack of sleep. Her movements were careful, almost rehearsed, like she was bracing for someone to approach her. When she noticed me, she froze. We stared at each other for a few seconds that felt longer than they were. She didn't wave. Neither did I. I gave a small nod, nothing more. Then I turned away, put my groceries in the passenger seat, and drove off. I didn't look back. That was the last time I saw her up close. In the weeks that followed, I heard little pieces of her fallout through people who felt compelled to share updates. Jenna moved in with a friend temporarily. Greg never reached out to her again. Emily made sure the details of her affair circulated among the group she used to socialize with. Some people thought she deserved it. Others thought it was cruel. I didn't have much opinion either way. It was never about revenge for me. It was about finally stepping away from something that had been rotting for longer than I'd admitted. One afternoon, a mutual acquaintance forwarded me an email Jenna had sent to a small circle of friends. In it, she described herself as misunderstood and lonely, claimed the affair had been a mistake born of feeling neglected. She never mentioned that she'd laughed at me in public or that she'd carried on the lie for almost a year. I read the email once, then deleted it. I didn't feel any urge to correct her version of events. People like Jenna always needed an audience to validate their story. I was finished being one of them. Moving into my new place was easier than I expected. Without shared furniture or reminders of her, it felt like a clean start. I bought a second-hand dining table and a couch. I didn't rush to decorate. For the first time in years, I had no one else's preferences to consider. I spent the first weeks establishing new routines. Simple ones. Cooking my own dinners. Reading in the evenings without checking if she'd be home late. Sleeping without waiting for the sound of the garage door. The peace surprised me. I had assumed I'd feel emptiness or regret. Instead, I only felt relief. About 2 months after the divorce was final, I got one last email from Jenna. The subject line was closure. She wrote, "I hope you're satisfied with what you did. You destroyed everything we built. You embarrassed me. I never meant for it to end this way. You didn't have to make it so final. Maybe someday you'll understand." I closed the email without replying. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. There was nothing left to discuss. A few weeks later, I ran into Lauren in town. She was with a friend and we exchanged a short, civil greeting. She looked healthier than she had at the cabin, more certain of herself. As we parted, she paused. "I'm glad you got out," she said. "Me too," I told her. And I meant it. Jenna didn't attempt to contact me again. Eventually, even the mutual friends stopped bringing her up. It was as if the performance she'd invested so much energy in had finally ended for everyone involved. One evening in spring, I sat on my back step with a cup of coffee, watching the last light fade. I thought about how long I'd tolerated feeling small in my own life. How easily I'd accepted being treated like an inconvenience. I understood then that leaving wasn't about punishing her. It was about choosing not to be part of a story that had never respected me. Sometimes people think endurance is the same as love. But all endurance proves is that you're willing to lose yourself to keep something that isn't real. Jenna never understood that. She thought her secrets were proof of how clever she was. She believed control was something you held onto by making sure other people were always guessing. But the moment I stopped playing along, she lost the only advantage she had. Months later, when I looked back at that Thanksgiving night, the night she mocked me, I felt nothing. No bitterness. No sadness. Just a calm certainty that walking away was the most honest decision I'd ever made. She once said there was nothing to be thankful for. She was wrong. In the end, I was thankful for the moment I finally saw her clearly. Because that clarity freed me. And sometimes that's all the closure you ever need.